Hey guys, I'm Vulture Culture. Might be cold outside, but I'm drunk in Florida. Welcome to the stream tonight. We're going to be checking out the Kawai SX-240 and the Roland JX-3P. It's tucked underneath here, and I've got a retroactive programmer for the JX-3P, and I've got a stereo-opping programmer for the SX-240. This is a Tontec modded SX-240 for what that's worth. Essentially, a Tontec mod just really gives you the ability to use like a modern MIDI controller to help program it. But frankly, fractally, it's not that big of a difference. I actually kind of like using just the standard interface for this. And these are two really amazing DCO synths, depending on who you would ask. I think for me, these would be probably what I consider to be the best DCO synths from the 80s. Of course, everybody's going to have their opinion on that, but I would prefer either of these synths over something like a Juno 106, for instance. They're both incredible. What's great about the JX-3P, sorry it's tucked underneath here, it is a gorgeous looking synth, but there's only so many ways to make a shot work with all of this. JX-3P looked on Reverb today, and you can get one with shipping for $900, which is pretty incredible. I mean, that's like Behringer DeepMind 12 territory, right? And just to be able to have a vintage piece of hardware from 1983 with that Roland DCO sound. So essentially a Juno 106, but it's got two oscillators per voice instead of just one, like a Juno 106. And it also has the same filter as the Roland Jupiter 8, the most legendary Roland synth of all time. So the fact that you can get that for $900, it's got to be one of the most slept on analog synths of all time. Kawai SX-240 either needs no introduction, or you might not have ever seen one of these because less than 1,000 were ever made, which makes them very rare and pretty damn expensive. This I looked today, and you could get one for about $2,400. So it's about a 2.5 times price difference between the two of these. And obviously, some of the price of the SX-240 is the fact that it has it's just rare, right? You know, the more rare a synth is, it's gorgeous. I love this color scheme. But there are a couple of things that set it apart. One is it's got 8 voices instead of 6, which can be stacked. So it's in like a, you can turn it into a 4-voice synth, but it's running both of the, like a total of fucking 6 oscillators per voice or something, because you have 2 DCOs per voice, just like you do on the JX-3P, but you also have a sub oscillator as well, like you do on the Juno 106. So it's like the best of both worlds. You also have SSM 2044 filters in here, which is the same as the Prophet 5 revisions 1 and 2 and the Poly 6 PPG wave. So it's kind of like they both have these like really famous filters. So yes. Mr. Smithy, welcome to the stream. There actually is, if you look on my channel, under the videos, I have a how to program any analog synth class. I think it's like an hour or something, and it basically shows you how to do all of the stuff that I'm doing tonight. Nick says the Matrix 6. Yeah, so the Matrix 6 would be another one of those DCO synths that might be up there. Ellen says the feature that makes me happy about the JX-3P and the 128-step sequencer. Yeah, it is a really great sequencer, a lot of fun. Johnny says, never seen an SX or a JX. Well, you're in for a treat. These things sound amazing. So why don't we go ahead and get into the sounds? I'm going to hold shift and hit the LFO1 button, which is also the initialize button here. We got a little noise. What's going on with this noise? Where's that coming from? Okay. Seems good. Seems better anyways. And so that's going to initialize this patch. And I'm going to just bring the oscillator mix all the way to the first oscillator and drop it down a note. So that's all I'm going to do to change the initialize patch. So now we have this nice, this just real clean oscillator sound. Is it raining or something? Maybe it's raining. Sometimes that happens and I don't realize that that's a thing. Now up here, I actually just created a preset that's a basic sawtooth patch. And we actually tried to do this stream before. There were some problems with the synth, so we got it fixed. And so what we're going to do is we're going to check out the oscillators, just the sawtooths first, because the oscillators are actually pretty complex with some of the differences here. And so for me, I'd actually rather start with the sawtooths so we can just kind of get a bearing about what the synth sounds like. and then move over to the filter, because I think the filter is going to be the more interesting part. That's really going to set apart the characteristic of these two synthesizers. And then we can go back to the oscillator and then talk about some of the other features like the ensemble chorus. We've got a really great Juno analog chorus in this synth, and we have a 3-bucket brigade delay ensemble in this synth. They both sound great, but they are kind of different. We might check them out. These synths are in mono just because I didn't want to mess with anything too much with doing a demo like this. But you will notice there's a little bit of reverb on. And that's coming from my plugin Inktomi, which is free currently for a limited time. So if you're a Windows user, I don't have a Mac version quite yet, but you might as well go and download that for free. It's just links in the description of this video. Let's see. Yeah, there's no pulse width on the JX-3P, just standard. But one thing is you actually can use, I think it's one of the metalizer modes or the hard sync to create pulse width modulation on a JX-3P. I don't know if that works on an 8P or a JX-10 for what it's worth. Yeah, and people will talk about the different envelopes and stuff like that. So that's a thing, but we'll get into all of that. Let's hear the sawtooth down low. That's the JX-3P and the SX-240. I noticed for me when I checked this out that the low oscillators are really similar. Almost to the point where it's not too worth talking about it. Let's go up an octave. You can hear that they're DCOs, so they're staying very tightly in tune. A little bit more fizzle on the top of the SX-240, maybe. I don't know. What do you guys hear? So I think here's where you can start to really, we're getting some separation in the sound. The JX sounds a lot fatter in this range. SX-240 is a lot brighter. Little less fat, little bit more sizzle on the top. Let's go up an octave. I agree, synth theory, a little bit more nasal. All the way up here. You can start to hear a little distortion actually at the top here. That could be an issue with somehow of how I've routed it, but I think one thing I've noticed about this synth is it runs hot, so I wouldn't be surprised if at the current VCA level I'm actually overdriving it a bit or something like that, so keep that in mind that I'm sure somebody probably has a really, is going to be like, oh, Alex, you messed this up, you should have done it this way. This was as close as I could get them for the sake of the stream. More nasal. Okay, so I'm hearing some nasalness. So yeah, but I mean the JX just sounds so. They both have a little bit of a difference. So let's just leave it at that. I wanted to familiarize your ears with how these two synths sound raw, so we can discuss the filters. So both of these synths have a dual filter architecture. They have a high pass filter, so why don't we start there just because why not? And then the same thing over here. So I'm actually going to just go over to, I could use my sweet little friend over here. Let's see where that is. I know it has the high pass filter here, but oh well, we'll just use the, I quite like actually the synths here. Cut off. Where is the high pass filter? I know it's around here somewhere. It's on the synth. There it is. It's not, so interestingly, the high pass filter is not in the VCS section over here. A lot of people will complain about the fact that the SX-240 has, it only has one knob, so sort of the alpha dial type thing, but it's really not bad. I just forgot where the high pass was. So let's check this out. Go down an octave. So you can get pretty thin. Probably. probably a little thinner on the SX-240, but I mean, essentially, I don't almost ever think there's a time I want to go even this thin with a polysynth. But the option's there in case you want it. Why don't we go check out the filter? So we can actually just use this knob on the controller for this. But we also probably need to adjust the EG amount here so we can actually hear. Yeah. Right, and then over here, we have the same thing. Now you'll notice the stepping of both filters, and that is just coming from the low resolution of MIDI. This synth is from 1983, and this one's from 1984. For that reason, going over MIDI and stuff like that doesn't go as smoothly as you would like it to, but all of the envelopes and stuff, it's an analog synth. It's going to be very smooth through that. Even if, like, I don't know if the envelopes, I think in the JX-3P is controlled. Mr. Smithy asks, can you play different instruments on the keyboard using different music sample packs? Well, both of these synths are hardware analog synths from the 80s, so they're kind of stuck with the sounds that you can make with them. So you can make your own sounds with them, but you're not going to be able to load samples into a keyboard like this because there were samplers and romplers at the time, but I don't really think I can think of a synth that was like sort of the dual architecture of that. Let's see. It's kind of like a wine club. Yeah. Well, it is a lot of fun. Yeah. The ADSR is digital in the JX, but that's not going to stop it from being smooth. So anyways, let's go ahead and go down low. I prefer to go low to hear an oscillator, or I'm sorry, a filter sweep. So we'll do a nice slow one. The same idea. I feel like I'm off. Let me go to the range here and bring that down. I don't know what happened. So let's check this out. Go ahead and do that one more time with the JX, just so we can do a fair comparison. Immediately, I think the JX filter's more throaty and vowely. It's a little more clinical up top, right? It's a little bit more of, it has a little bit more of that. I'm going to turn the volume of this up a bit. Turn this up just a little bit more. I think I had them not entirely volume mats. Yeah. Oh, Autumn, have a great night. Love you so much. We'll talk soon, okay? James says, the patch creation function on the retroactive controller changed my life. Great feature when starting a new patch idea. Yeah, so what James is talking about is the coolest thing about the retroactive controllers. I can't rate these highly enough because the scratch patch generator, which lets you come up with a category like, so say bass or lead or pads or strings or brass. And what it does is it uses random numbers to create patches as starting points. And you can do as many as you like. Maybe we'll check that out at the end of the stream. We're not really reviewing this. But anyways, I love what Rob is doing. Retroactive makes the coolest stuff. And I think it's worth it just for that because you have infinite variety. So let's see. Jesus, welcome to the stream. How's it going, my friend? DSS-1 and VZ-1 are synth samplers from the 80s. Yeah, that's fair. The DSS-1 I have behind me, and it does have a digital synth engine. I was thinking analog synth engine plus samples. The closest thing I could come to would be like running a sampler into the Kawai SX-240, which actually can use, it's an analog synth, but it can use a Kawai sampler as a layer. That's another stream for another day. Let's add some resonance. So I'm going to add about 25% resonance to both of these guys. So I'm going to just kind of try this out and see how it sounds. Almost not too much of a difference. So what I notice is as soon as you start involving a little bit of resonance in the SX-240. It takes on this really nice sort of, it starts to get that throaty thing that was missing. But it is very clinical versus just really fat. So let's take it up to 50 for both of these guys. We're gonna take them both up to 50%. Crystal Love, welcome to the stream. Yeah, so it's interesting here. We really have a cork sniffing difference, right? I don't know if this matters to people who aren't musicians, but to synth heads like myself, this is the true, this is the crack cocaine. So you just don't get the same brightness with the JX-3P, but it actually sounds really nice. SX-240 kind of reminds me more of like a Moog, sort of thing. Obviously, they're both passing a good amount of bass. All right, let's take it up to 75% with both of these guys. So we'll just try to, and it's a rough science here. We'll see how it sounds. Mind Idiot, welcome to the stream. And we got Machine Storm here. How are both of you guys doing? Hate when my throaty thing goes missing. Which synth is the throat goat? Right now, I would say, well, what do you guys think? Which of these synths is the throat goat? It's more important what you guys think than me. Yo, that sounds so cool, honestly. It's got like a really great vowely thing, kind of in the upper, like in the mid-range of that. All right, so at like 75% resonance, the difference between these two filters has truly gotten there. So, the resonance isn't that crazy on the JX. Let's max it out on both for the, for the masochists in us. And we'll just check it out. This might cause some clipping to happen over at the computer, so I apologize if you hear some intermodular distortion. That is what it is. Man, that resonance is never... It's really not bad. I mean, I think the volume's pulled back a little bit, so what we could do is bring the volume down here just to compensate for how screaming the resonance is. So we're 100% on the SX-240. And again, that stepping is not the filter, that's the MIDI control of the filter. But you can hear at its extreme, the JX is actually a very reasonable. I almost question if it can self-oscillate. It's so reasonable, that resonance. I always thought it could, but I mean, it's got to, right? But it's a very nice, it's a very tame resonance. Whereas I think there are cool values that are similar to that on the SX-240. You just have to dial it way back. So I would say somewhere around, I'm guessing 60-70% of the resonance value of the SX-240 can give you comparable value sounds too. That little difference there in the implementation is pretty pretty substantial as far as it goes. Yeah, Mark, so I do have ads on, but I have them set to be the slowest possible amount. that YouTube allows. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not that worried about if running ads on the live stream. So if they're annoying, I'll turn them off in the future. But they are there now. I try to have them be like the lowest possible interval, but you know, that is the case of it. Machine Storm, the Polyvox. Yeah, that's the greatest analog resonance filter of all time. I love that synth so much. So far, what do you guys think? Is this synth worth 2.5 times what the JX-3P is? I just think the filter on the JX-3P sounds so good, especially at like 75%. Oh, it's so good. Turn that volume up a little bit more. Yeah, so that's how the filter sounds on both of these synths. So let's take a step back now that we've had a chance to do a nice filter sweep with everything. Yeah, not so far. The JX is doing it for me, Aquatic says. Yeah, they're both really great. Let's go ahead and talk about the oscillators. So over here on the JX-3P, we have 2 DCO oscillators per voice. So DCO stands for digitally controlled oscillator, but it is not a digital oscillator. It's an analog oscillator. Only the tuning is controlled digitally. So this was an innovation to be able to make synthesizers have better tuning, because for those of you who have never experienced the horror of owning a vintage analog synth, if they do not have a good way to tune, it is a nightmare to tune a synthesizer from this era. So the digitally controlled tuning of these analog oscillators was a huge innovation. Nowadays, a lot of the times people prefer the sound of voltage controlled oscillators where the tuning is done via voltage. And it has a little bit more chance for imperfections to creep in. When you're in a studio environment like this, where you have control over all of the synths and the temperature's about the same and they're not getting knocked around, it's great. But when you're on a stage, I would any day choose one of these digitally controlled synths, digitally controlled oscillators, because you'll know they'll be in tune. If I showed up to a gig with my Poly 6 and it's out of tune, that's like a 2-hour process of retuning it. It's a nightmare. Whereas doing this is much easier. Torben, welcome to the stream. How's it going? Mark says, let's see. Yes, so just let me know if it's annoying, guys. I'd be happy to turn them off if it's causing any issues for people. Just, you know, you guys let me know what you need. So what's cool about this synth, though, is you have this oscillator mix knob. So in here we have a different octave here. And that's just set here. What we could do is bring this one down and check out the other wave shapes available to us. So what we have is sawtooth wave. That's what we've been listening to this whole time. We also have a narrow pulse. It almost sounds high passed in a way. And then we have a square wave. And we actually have noise. As Dubstation Zero pointed out earlier, there's no like just basic way to do pulse width modulation on a JX series synth without modding it. You can actually do it with a single oscillator on a JX-3P by using, I believe, the sync feature. But for intents and purposes, it's not like a super obvious thing how to do that. So anyways, those are our options here. Upstairs on the SX-240, things are a lot more complicated or interesting. So going over to the tone generator, first off, we can have the sawtooth on, but we can also have the pulse width on at the same time. So this is sort of more like a Juno 106 in the sense that you can actually, let's say, turn the sawtooth off and turn the pulse wave on. And you'll notice that it's very thin, and that's because the pulse width has a value, so we can turn that down. All right, so real quick, just for the fun of it, why don't we check out how the square wave sounds? So, on the JX, I mean, it's just massive. Right? Let me make sure that range is right. Yeah, so the thickness is crazy. It's just... Versus here, this is the pulse width at 0, right? So we haven't even taken it up into where it could go. Right? So a very different timbre to it. Of course, we can make the pulse width more narrow. And we just have an option to move to a narrow pulse width. There's no variable control like you have on the SX-240. So this would be a con for me on the JX-3P. I like a pulse width that's not quite this narrow. Like this is narrow. And no in between. Whereas here we've got a wide range of a palette here to select. Right, which sounds awesome. So why don't we turn that down? I'm gonna go back, turn the pulse wave, AKA square wave off, turn the saw back on, right? And then what we also have is a sub oscillator. So now we can almost take it into Roland SH-101 territory, you know? Right, which sounds super fat. And we're not done here. We've got a couple of different options here, but we'll just leave that on for a second. Let's compare that over here. So what we could do, right, is set a square wave. A sub wave is almost always going to be a square wave. The way this works is every time the oscillator cycles, so that's what an oscillator is, right? It's just a wave shape that cycles, and that moves the speaker that you're listening to my voice with in a sinusoidal mode or way of being. And so every time it cycles, it sets to flip up, and then the next time it cycles, it flips down. And if you think about that, that would be a square wave, right? So up, down, up, down, up, down. So it's always an octave or two down from that. So what we can create essentially what is a sub oscillator on this synth over here. So we'll set DCO2 to a sawtooth wave, and then we'll set DCO1 down an octave and to a square wave, and we should have a similar sound. I'm going to bring the oscillator mix back to 50-50. We'll see how it sounds. So, you know, just... And then up here we've got... And one thing that you'll notice is we have a little bit of a tuning difference here. So sometimes it can be real hard to get, for some reason on my controller here, it can be a motherfucker to get the coarse tuning. So let's try this. So that's the difference there. Oh, I love that example, Alan, for sure. Let's see. Sounds as fat as a Nintendo Game Boy. Yeah. So, yeah, and of course, the Game Boy was only capable of making pulse waves and using noise to make it sound. So, I've always wondered if a Game Boy is actually analog. I think it's digital because I think there is a way to play samples back in it. But if anybody knows the essence of how a Game Boy's audio works, that's one of those mysteries. And I've watched a lot of YouTube videos on it, and I can't say definitively I know what the answer is there. Yeah, the 240. So this is the interesting thing with the 240 versus the 3P is if we were only to shoot it out like on the sawtooth waves versus with the filter, I think most of us, 80% of us, would probably go with the JX-3P. It's just got a great sounding filter. And Sam Mims from the Synth Wizards, Syntor, he always says that it's the filter that really makes the sound of the synthesizer, not so much the oscillators. However, the fact that we can have this really, this has like a perfect sub oscillator, as opposed to with this, you're still going to get a little imperfection. You know? you know, this is starting to really, you get where it's coming from. That's just with the sawtooth on. So let's go ahead and turn the sub oscillator off and turn DCO 2 on. So this whole time we've been listening to one oscillator. We now have another oscillator. And I believe we can detune from that. So why don't we go ahead and do a similar thing. So we're kind of close on here. So I'm just adding a little detune to both of them. So now we can check out some chords. I think the this one's getting a little louder because of just the way it kind of stacks oscillators up. But I mean, this, okay, so we're just listening to sawtooths, by the way. I think the second oscillator on the SX-240 is always a square wave, so let's try that out. I don't know. What do you guys think so far on this? Now that we're getting here, let's see. Yes, I did see the Look Mom No Computer video where he synced 48 Game Boys into one monophonic synth. Yeah, we're cooking with propane for real now. So one thing is, I want to make sure I'm not fucking anything up. Let's make sure that the sustain level of the envelope generator is all the way up and the envelope depth is all the way up on the JX-3P. Yep, so that's as bright as the synth is going to get. And that's something, I would say probably the primary difference between this synthesizer and something like the JX-8P is the JX-8P can go brighter than a JX-3P. Depending on the context, a lot of the times nowadays, we want synths that are a little darker, warmer, fatter, because VSTs exist, right? You know, we don't need synths to be super bright. And, you know, but in the 80s, there was sort of this arms race for who could have the most like digital sounding synthesizer. And I think the SX-240 sort of follows in that a little bit more, where this is much more of like a post DX7 synthesizer, where it's getting a lot of high end through. Wow. Yeah, so I don't know. Yo, Hans Volt, how's it going, my friend? Would it go as bright with tree tacking, or is the cutoff all the way open? Let's go ahead and make sure that I'm just not messing anything up here, so... Yep, that's just it. As far as I can tell, there's always the chance that I'm fucking something up live. That's the beauty of doing a live stream. But if it is something I'm doing live, it's not apparent, it's not super obvious how to fix this. And I shouldn't use the word fix. To me, this is a feature, not a bug. I like the way the JX-3P sounds. I mean, this just sounds so fat. But you know, when you start kind of getting into making a patch, it's kind of crazy how... You see, the thing about the SX-240 is when you listen to the oscillators on their own, I think the phrase people were using was nasal, right? But listening to them in a chord, you go, wait a second, that's starting to sound a little fucking good. Hypothesis says the 3P still has a little more presence to its sound until the SX-240 sub-os comes into the picture. Yes, the JX is great for bass. If you want to do like the bass line sounds of this, it's awesome. So what we can do is you know, adjust some of the range of this stuff to kind of get going. But what I do want to say is this is kind of where this stops. And then what we can do is we can turn the pulse on. We can set it to pulse width. So by the way, I actually missed this. So let's go ahead and go to DCO, turn this off, go back up to pulse width. And so we've got control over the pulse being off. So we're just hearing this sawtooth. Let's turn that off. So we're hearing nothing, pulse on. And then we can actually do pulse width modulation. Which I think is being controlled by the LFO. So let me just move over there and see if I move that. That's kind of nice. And then just moving the... kind of like a thinner pulse width. I don't know that I like inherently love that on its own, but if we turn the sawtooth on, turn the sub oscillator on, and we turn DCO2 on, right? So we essentially have 4 oscillators going on. And over here, we're just not going to get that sound. But that's not to knock on the JX-3P. I mean, this thing just... so fat, but we're getting some serious oscillator craziness. I mean, we're just listening to oscillators right now. We're not using a filter, envelopes, or anything like that. Yeah. So Nick says, with every time you start getting somewhere with the JX, I really want you to turn on the chorus, especially versus the stack. Yeah. Too much with these sub-os. Yeah, and I mean, the thing with the sub-oscillator is, you know, you might not want to use it for every sound, right? It sounded really good monophonically, right? So turning that off for a second. It just retains so much more clarity in the top end of the SX-240. And yeah, the low end is restrained on the SX-240, but when you're playing a chord, it's actually kind of nice to not have the low end just blow everything out, right? I think the volume's a little too loud on this. It's harder because on the SX-240, it just turns on oscillators. Over on the JX-3P, you've got an oscillator mix, which I quite like. I like that you're able to blend between the oscillators so the volume stays the same. So you can hear how it sounds on its own. And you also have that nice control of, so I've got a square and a sawtooth. Maybe I don't want it to be 50-50, maybe a little bit more sawtooth. But still getting some of that great detune in there. So that's definitely a thing. Yeah, so anything with a major seventh tends to muddy up. Mac, welcome to the stream. What mixer am I using? So I'm actually just using a RME Digiface interface with a bunch of preamps. So like Focusrite preamps. That's what and they're all running into the computer directly. So I actually don't have a mixer in some sense. It's all just being controlled in Reaper. Okay, let's talk about a couple more things and then we'll move on because I think you guys have got the grasp of what's cool about this. We have this brass feature, which I believe is just cross modulation on this synth. So on just a little bit more. I don't really hear a difference, but I think if we do some coarse tuning... Let's hear how that sounds with the brass off and on. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I really... Unless I'm missing something, to me that's not super obvious. I guess you can down-tune this? That's kind of cool. We also have a similar feature. We've got metal on the JX-3P. And we also have sync. So that's useful for creating hard sync type sounds. I can't remember if there's a hard sync option on the SX-240, but I'm not seeing it with my naked eye. I do love how this is all laid out here, although they did it better on the K3, where you can just press one of these and move the dial. This, you have to move the parameter cursor around to get there, but it's still not bad. Like, I really don't think people should not buy one of these synths because it's not one knob per function. I'll be the first to tell you when there's a synth that I don't like, or, you know, I love the Chroma Polaris, right? I wish there was a couple more knobs on it, right? Over here, it's just, it is what it is, and it's not that bad. I think it's okay. So that's a thing. We've got hard sync over here. I don't think I'm seeing hard sync anywhere on the SX-240, but I might come across it later. I might just be missing it. It might be in a weird spot. We have portamento and glissando, so that's an interesting feature that's missing from here. We have glissando. This is basically like a a CS type thing. And how do I do the speed of that? There's definitely a way to control the speed of that sound, but it's not apparent to me, so... Oh. Whatever, you can do a glissando effect. Y'all know what's up. Tom, welcome to the stream. The Planet preset or Planet preset on JX-3P is so good. Yes, I agree. I love that so much. Torben says, I disagree here. You simply can leave more notes out. Like, you typically play the root on the bass and say, let's say a C11, leave out the fifth. Yeah, so that's something you might notice. I play a lot of power chords in the left hand. That way I don't muddy it up too much. If you play a third in there and then add in like some color notes, you know, I don't know. That's okay, but to me it's cleaner without the third. Right? A little bit of music theory here. Justified tuning. The third is a little bit out as compared, as compared to like natural tuning, like what Johann Sebastian Bach would have heard when it comes to tuning. Same thing with like a howling sixth. So you just want to be aware of that. And when it comes to these analog synths, the low frequencies do tend to stack up pretty aggressively. And both of these synths have high pass filters to counteract that, by the way. I mean, they deliberately introduced that into this type of synth to help that problem. But it's one of those things. It's like drinking. It's like, I just always want one more glass of absinthe, which, by the way, I need to drink some fucking whiskey. I've gone way too long without drinking. Hey, by the way, before I just start sucking it down, cheers to all you wonderful people for hanging out and making this stream amazing every Wednesday at 9. I just really appreciate you guys. So thank you so much. Let's get fucked up. Can I get some scum cheers in the chat? Yeah. Gerald, welcome to the stream. How's it going, my friend? Let's see. Yeah, no, there's definitely a thing that polyphony can muddy the sound out in, for sure. And it's smart to be, you know, cognizant of that. One good thing about synth that loses a little bit of bass in the resonance, it's probably, for me, I prefer it for something like a poly sound over a bass sound. So that's good. Thank you, Crystal Love. Yo, we got Gaetano up in the chat. How's it going, my friend? Just checking out some synths, you know. How are you doing? So, pretty close. Let's move on and actually create more of a pad out of this sound. So we're just going to go to attack here and increase it to, let's see what my total value is, is 100, so I'm going to just go to about 50. I'm going to do the same thing on the attack over here, so I'll just increase that to about 50. I'm going to bring the sustain down to 50. Why don't we just do the classic 50 attack, 50 decay, 50 sustain, 50 release, and we'll do the exact same thing over here. So we're going to just do 50, and we're going to do the sustain to 50, release to 50. Just to compare, I mean, it doesn't really matter. This is the type of thing that's not like huge. Another point here is we have a separate envelope for the amplifier versus the filter on the SX-240, whereas on the JX-3P it is shared. So in some sense, of course, you can get more complicated sounds when you have two separate envelopes, but you know, in my case, I never seem to miss it on the JX-3P, I guess is where I'm going. So, of course, it doesn't really matter what these 50% values are, but they're interesting. They'll give you an idea of which synth can, you know, takes longer to get to where it's going. I think I need to make sure that's actually going to the VCA here. So the JX is a little slower, which is nice. Little longer release. Again, it's pretty trivial because of course you could match it a little closer. So if we go to the attack and we slow it down to 75, 75, and the release up to 75, let's see how that sounds. So 75 is now much longer than 50% was here. So let's just increase that a bit, you know, bring it up a little. Yes. On these synths, you don't need to worry. They only have 6 voices anyways. So the SX-240 actually has 8 voices, which I think matters when we start getting into different key modes where we can actually stack the synth and turn it into a 4-voice, dual voice synth with a total of a sawtooth, a pulse wave that can do pulse width modulation, a sub oscillator, and a second oscillator per voice. So that would be like 8 per note, versus over here, we're always stuck with just 2 oscillators per voice. That's relevant for sure. You're going to get 4 times that. But because it's DCO, the tuning is not, you know, and those are locked together. DCO 2 is separate than DCO 1 in the sub oscillator. So in that sense, the tuning difference should be kind of similar, perhaps. To my ear, they sound really close. I'd say maybe a little bit more of a tuning difference here. Oh, I've got Metalizer on. That's why I was doing that. So it was syncing the sound. I'm very stupid sometimes. You do not need a lot of detune on the JX. Really thick. Let's add a little bit more detune to the SX-240. Just a bit. Twin Cities, welcome to the stream. Do you ever get a whooshy sound on the JX-3P when the chorus is activated and you aren't playing? Let me just do that for you real quick. You're not going to be able to hear it. Let me just run. I'm coming. You guys hear that? So what's going on is the chorus chips in this JX3P are stellar. Some people will tell you that like chorus chips are always noisy. That's not the case. Chorus chips die over time and they start to get noisy. So a lot of Roland JX3Ps and Juno 106s, the choruses are just very noisy. That's fixable, but it's a thing you gotta fix. That was with the chorus on and no problem, right? So yeah, so Euro DJ, how's it going? Yes, big fan of the Roland Forever movement. I love these vintage synths. JX-3P SX-240. So while I drink more, by the way, cheers for everybody hanging out tonight. It's fucking awesome. What do you guys think so far? We've kind of covered the oscillators and the filter. I want to get the filter involved. But so far, what are we thinking about the sound? So I'm just bringing the cutoff down and the EG amount all the way up, and we'll see what we have. We're going to do the exact same thing. Just go over to cutoff, bring it down, make sure that's all the way up. Try to match it. Bring the cutoff all the way down. Oh yeah, we got to increase the attack for sure. And the decay. We got to increase the cutoff a bit here. Not too much. We'll decay down a bit. Just trying to match the two. Oh yeah, pretty inconsequential for the most part. Here's what I think about it, Twin Cities, is if it's probably not an issue and actually adds to the character of the sound until it is. Like when you multi-track the synth, if the noise starts to be in, like the noise will stack up. And if that's the case, then that would be the time to fix it. Otherwise, I don't mind these synths having interesting little inconsistencies. Yeah, so my chorus is super, it just seems like it's great. To my knowledge, the synth hasn't been serviced since the 80s. I don't know. Wow, it just sounds so good, doesn't it? All right, I'm just bringing the attack down just a little bit and cut off down just a little bit. I think that's pretty close, right? That sounds pretty close. Bring the fine tune down. A little bit more release on the filter, I think. A little bit more, something like that. So we've got kind of a nice pad. Let's go ahead and do my favorite chord progression. Oh, it's gorgeous. What do we think? Camera intermittently is going black. The one facing the synths. Could be an issue. It probably is not just you. If it's just that camera. So we'll keep an eye on it. Let me know if it keeps being a problem, okay? Thank you very much. I appreciate you letting me know. Let's see. Okay, you guys are all seeing it. Perfect. And by perfect, I mean, I'm not happy about it, but whatever. It's been the stream of technical difficulties, but it's been fun to be able to check these two out. So let me see. This is the envelope all the way up. I can increase the cutoff so we can get brighter. But if I want to get some nice movement, it gets pretty bright. Let's see. You know, kind of the theme of this stream is the SX-240 can get brighter. I just think what it is too is it's the pulse width modulation is interesting. It's like a much thinner pulse width modulation for better or worse, which I don't know that I love. Let's try to fatten this up. You know, and because of the architecture, apparently take it up about 7 cents. Interesting little thing going on there. I don't know what's causing it to have that little cyclical element to it. I don't know if I've got the LFO should be all the way off here. I have no idea what's causing it to do that little thing. Next comparison, the Juno 106 versus the Poly 800. How's the synth cam going black issue going? Is that resolved itself? Or is it still an issue? Just let me know. I mean, it is shocking how close they are, but I have to say the detune on the JX-3P just sounds great. I believe metal in sync is off, so here's a chord with it off. Here's a chord with it on. Don't notice too much of a difference. Sync on. The biggest difference is because there's not a whole lot of tuning difference between the oscillators. With sync on, you essentially just hear the oscillators are in perfect tune. So cool. You guys just let me know if something gets, you know, off. I appreciate you letting me know. So the SX-240 certainly has the brightness there. Let's bring them both back down a bit, so we'll see. I like having a nice dark pad. Let's add that resonance in. So let's see how it sounds with the JX-3P. Let's go with... We lose a little bit of volume. Add some resonance in. What do we think about these filters? Need to increase, I think, the release a little bit on the increase the volume maybe just a little bit here. One thing that I like about the SX-240, which I just don't think is possible with the JX-3P, is the SX-240, because of the separate filter envelope from the amplifier envelope, the characteristic of the release of the pad is different, and there's not a lot I can do about that over here, aside from you can do some tricks like, you know, using a gate instead of the envelope but that's not going to be that helpful for this type of sound. That would be more useful for something like a bass line. So let's see. Fuzzy in a good way. Which of the two synths do you think is fuzzier? I think they both sound really good. As you've cranked the resonance, I think it's not just me. I think that the I don't know. I might be going crazy, but to me, it sounds like there's a little bit more low end being retained by the SX-240. Really nice character to the release of the SX-240 that's a little bit missing. Mark Rouse asks, where does the SX-250 lay along the K4 and K5? The SX-250, or do you mean the 240? There's also, I think, the SX-200 and the 210. So the SX-240 would be the bigger, badder 210. But there is another synthesizer, I want to say it's the SX-200, which is only 4 voices, but arguably a more powerful 4-voice synth than the SX-240. I don't know. The 240. Okay, so where does the SX-250 lay along with the K4 and K5M? Well, I want to do this exact same stream, but with the SX-240 and the K3. I think those two are very comparable because they have the same analog filter. So the biggest difference is what's going on with the oscillators, one being digital, one being analog. The analog oscillators do sound good on this synth. I don't think anybody would argue with that. You might have a preference about what you think about which oscillators sound better on the JX-3P, Kawai K3, Kawai SX-240. But they're all good. Like, none of them are bad. So the K4 and the K5 are going to be very digital sounding because there's nothing analog going on there. As far as like awesome soundscapes, the K4, I've never had one in the studio. I hope to get one. Just incredible sounds I've heard from that. But that's got, you know, effects built in and everything, so it can do a whole lot. Over here, you're not going to get anything that complex from either of these synths, but what you will get is the analog warmth and beauty and character that you can only get from something like these vintage analog synths. So I hope that answers. Oh, I would love that, Mark. That would be fantastic. Shoot me an email over at alex@vultureculture.live. That would be great. I don't know if anybody else has noticed this. There's also the voice stealing thing. So there's a little bit more voice stealing with 6 voices versus 8. I don't know the voice stealing. Notice it there. But you can hear that there. So an interesting little difference there. So I'm going to just turn the volume up on both of these guys a little bit because you do lose a lot as you bring it down. So bring this up a little bit more. Release is a little long. So yeah, that's kind of your basis of this. Now what I want to check out is keyboard mode dual on this synth. So I believe this stacks. Jesus fuck, that was not what I meant to do. What that did was it did the sort of JX10 type thing. I apologize for that, by the way, the guys, sorry. Of stacking the voices there. Let me try, what is it, keyboard assign? That's probably what it is. My apologies. So you can play 2 separate patches at once on the SX-240 like you can on a Roland JX-10 or Roland D50, whereas over here you're stuck with, there's just one setup. It's not a bitimbral synth. Let's go see what our options are here. Oh yeah, here we go. So we've got mono, poly 4, poly 8. So those are our 3 modes that we can do. The JX-3P actually does not have a monophonic mode or a unison mode at all, which is kind of heartbreaking and then kind of doesn't matter. For me, a synth like the JX-3P sounds so fucking good with its chorus on. And again, I haven't gotten into the choruses yet. We'll talk about that. To me, because of that, I don't ever feel like I wish it did have a unison mode. That's not what I'm really into with this synth. But for some people, that is a big deal. So anyways, checking this out, we were in poly 8 this whole time. Let's go to poly 4 and see what we have. Let's do our favorite chord progression. It's interesting. I don't really hear much of a difference at all. I'm not hearing really any, you know, and it might be because in a DCO synth, you know, it's the tuning of all of those oscillators is so perfect. I don't know if anybody can hear a difference there. Let me know if you can. I might be doing something wrong, but I don't think I am. I think that's literally kind of it when it comes to that. There's just not a lot going on. I don't see an obvious way to like detune one layer from the other. That would be cool, but I don't see it. I don't see any way that would do that, which is kind of shocking because you would want that. That kind of defeats the purpose of, you know, so aside from voice stealing, which in most cases isn't that much of a problem with a lot of release. But that chord progression, you're not even hearing it, right? To me, it seems like that's pretty much spot on. Over here, versus the biggest advantage I can hear, unless I'm doing something wrong, like the lower volume, should that be? I don't think there's any difference that I can hear as far as between the two synths, but you guys let me know if you hear something, okay? If you guys can hear something, that's awesome, because I don't have that available to me right now. Anyways, let's talk about the LFO real quick. So it's probably not going to surprise anybody, but there's an LFO. Let me see, is the detune here doing anything? I don't know what's up with that. Okay, I think that might be a Kiwi mod thing. So there's certain features on the PG2K from Retroactive that only work with a modified JX-3P. This is a stock original JX-3P. Let's go ahead and add some LFO amount to the voltage controlled filter. Now we've got a few different options actually on the JX-3P. We've got sine wave, which is what we're all familiar with. We got square wave. And we have sample and hold, which is actually really cool. Oh yeah. Sounds so good. Sounds super good. I haven't seen anybody in chat recently. I don't know if I maybe lost the live chat or something for a second. So go ahead and post something. Maybe just no one's chatted. Going over to the LFO over here. Let's go ahead and check that out. Where is it? Oh, it's over here. Let's go ahead and apply some LFO amount. And then we can go in here and check out what we have. Oh, cool. Good. Glad to hear. Good. Just want to make sure everybody was still here. Twin Cities asks, sorry, off topic, do you have a favorite mono synth for phat bass besides Moog? Actually, hey Nightshade, welcome. Twin Cities, I would never use a Moog for bass because as you crank the resonance, you're going to lose all of that bass. I shouldn't say never, but it would not be my go-to. Makes a pretty good like low, deep brass bass type sound because it loses some of that bass as you increase the resonance. Easily, it would be the Polyvox is the best synth I've ever heard when it comes to bassline stuff as far as analog synths go. The Roland SH-2, really great mono synth. It's got 2 oscillators plus a sub per voice, so sort of like the SX-240 in that sense, but it's just really fat. Also really bright though. It's a very bright synth, so depending on how you feel about that, the Polyvox is going to push a lot more. And then probably this is a boring answer, but it's kind of true. The Korg MS-20 is just kind of unbeatable in terms of what it can do. Those filters are crazy. You've got 2 per voice, the high pass, the low pass. You can modulate both. Get really crazy with its semi-modular stuff that's not possible on the Polyvox. Polyvox can do certain things like looping envelopes and stuff, but to just basically do a standard synth bass sound, my go-to is the Polyvox, but I would have to say the Korg MS-20 is probably great too. What do you guys think? What is your guys' favorite mono synths to go for bass? Twin Cities, what's the BS2? Electribe EA1 for cheap. Yeah, I believe it. Vanessa, thank you very much. Appreciate it. How's it going? Yeah, I would say actually to answer the question too, if you don't want to go analog, I think the FM basses are awesome. A lot of my favorite bands from the 80s, bands like Night Cereb, Frontline Assembly, they were using FM synths for bass. They weren't using analog synths. So glad to hear it, Vanessa. Synth Theory says MS-10 for bass. Yeah, I can't argue with that. Twin Cities Bass Station 2. Yeah, for sure. Taurus pedals. Yeah, that's also where to go with that. So I was just trying to match the LFOs here a little bit. So maybe just a little bit more speed here. We have a delay on both of them. Not that interesting for this type of sound, but it's useful for vibrato. Let's check out our waveforms. So we've got a few. It looks like we've got square wave. We've got triangle. We've got ramp. Oh, I'm playing the wrong synth. I was like, why am I not hearing anything? So square. And one thing to notice, mighty fucking Pintos here. One thing to notice, how's it going, my friend? Is that the square wave on the SX-240 is not super square. It's very soft, you know. Which I actually like that it's not, I forgot what synth it was that we're checking out. I think it was the Yamaha CS70M, where once we got the LFO going, it got like clicky, right? So if it's not soft enough, it's kind of musically useless. Over here, checking out the square wave real quick. And probably turn that down a little bit just to match the two. You can hear you have a much sharper square wave LFO on the JX-3P. I mean, for what it's worth, that's probably how it should be. And this one's not clicking or anything too, so that's there. But it's an interesting facet of this synthesizer. How was the stream tonight, Pinto? Let's see. Synth Theory says the Pro Mars. Okay, so it's basically one voice of the Jupiter 4. Sounds great. Dubstation 0 says the Roland 510 Eurorack version of the System 100. Yeah, I bet that's pretty nasty. That Buchla that Nick was playing, that fundamental was pretty crazy as well. So what are some of the other shapes? We don't have sample and hold up here, but we do have reverse saw. And this one, I think I remember from the live stream we did just looking at the SX-240, is almost a little heartbreaking because of the smoothing of that waveform creates it where it's not like you could use it for sidechain pumping effects. And we have a reverse feature, so we can reverse the shape of any of those LFO shapes. And so in this case, we should get something closer to a pluck, but you'll hear. Instead of getting like a pop, 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 it's wow, wow, wow. It's got that sort of... almost like a cat doing a little snarl sound to it. We don't have those features on the JX-3P at all. So, I mean, in some sense, you can't compare it. But I imagine if they were there, you wouldn't have that problem because of the nature of the square wave. So I think the sample and hold on the JX-3P, for me, I'm going to just speak for myself here. I love asking you guys for your opinions. But sometimes y'all got to hear Daddy's opinion. And Daddy's opinion is the sample and hold on the JX-3P is much more musically useful for me, just to be able to get that, like... I just love that sound so much. That's right, Synth Theory is slewed LFO in the Kawai. Is it even more obvious on pitch modulation? So let's check that out real quick just to answer your question there. So what we can do is use that same LFO to adjust the pitch modulation here. Let's go check this out. Where is it? The LFO amount. So this isn't going to sound nice, but it exists. And we'll go to, let's go to the LFO shape, and we'll use a square wave just to compare pitch modulation between the two. So I'll try to get that close. Harder to get these to line up. It seems like as I adjust these LFO amounts, I can't get like a nice, easy, I agree, Nick. I can't seem to get a nice, easy octave out of the square wave. Whereas over here, you definitely hear the slewing of the LFO on the SX-240, but it's very musical. You know, like I could use that sound. That's like I love doing square wave octaves. And I could be doing something just so fucking stupid, but it doesn't seem like I'm doing anything too stupid, where it's just not really easily giving me an octave value with the controller here. Yeah, so, you know, I think at the beginning of the stream, a lot of people are like, yo, it's JX-3P all day. And no doubt, if you have either of these two synthesizers, you're a very lucky person. I'm the luckiest person to have both these synths in here to actually check out with you guys. As far as though, you know, which of the two when it comes to like the LFO, they're both a little bit like mixed bags for me where neither of them fully satisfy me. Like to me, that's just, I'm not that into that. Whereas I like that sound, but again, you have that slew thing, and if we go and change the shape here to something else, just for the, you know. It's like a siren, but it's not quite a pluck. You know what I mean? It's not all the way there. Nice little noise going on here. Hell yeah, I've got my Alien Covenant Xenomorph here, and then I also have my Alien Laserdisc from back in the day. I don't even own a Laserdisc player. I just like collecting Laserdiscs. Realities in the Raw, welcome to the stream. I have a K3, which reminds me of this, but I've never heard of this Kawai, and the Roland only in passing. Yeah, so the SX-240 is super rare. It was, what is up with this microphone today? Is it just raining? It's not raining. This is just this microphone, this cable being a motherfucker. I apologize for the sound. Whoa, we're getting crazy up in here. Come on, baby. Come on. Give daddy what he needs. Work. K3 is an amazing synth. What's interesting is they have the same filter. So the SX-240 and the K3 both have SSM 2044s, I think is the number. Sorry if I got that wrong. And they're very similar. Enough that we even compared on one of the streams the patches, the brass patches from the SX-240 to the K3, and just like without any editing, they were pretty close. Ultimately, so it's this interesting thing where when you're looking at an SX-240, is it worth 2.5 times the value of the JX-3P? I mean, I don't know what you guys think. I think, in my opinion, it would be very hard to make that case. I think the SX-240 is an awesome synthesizer, but I think comparing everything, they're just not the same. And there are a few things that make the SX-40 really cool. The sub-oscillator sounds really great. Doing something similar with the JX-3P doesn't get you 100% of the way there. But the warmth and just so much about the JX-3P, it just always works. SX-240's a little different. One more thing we should check out for sure, just in the interest of if you haven't watched my separate streams on these synthesizers where I just checked out them individually. Let's turn the ensemble on the SX-240 and see how we're sounding. Oh, and turn the LFO off on the over here, because that's terrible. I mean, cool, but terrible. Now let's turn the shape of this to a triangle wave. Philip, welcome to the stream. Yes, I love the PG2K. They are, you know, expensive for just being a programmer. I mean, I guess they're not even really. Yo, what was that? Let me see. I couldn't see what that was. I'll check it out under the stream. I think this cable's starting to go on this camera too. And you never know what's going to happen. It's a wonderful thing that happens over here in the stream. Let's see. Let's catch up here on the chat. Alex at vultureculture.live. Yeah, so the ensemble and the chorus on both of these synths are stereo. I have them set up mono right now just to keep it fair in some sense, because the synths can get kind of weird if you... The balance of the chorus to the dry signal can make one synth sound more stereo than the other, so keeping them in mono is just a little more fair. Let's turn the this over to triangle. So we're listening to the chorus of the JX-3P. The ensemble. I guess it would be better if I turn the LFO off just for while we're listening to the sound of the synth. So why don't we just bear with me? I'm turning the ensemble off and the chorus off on both. So here is the dry sound. Dry SX-240. Feel like I need a little bit more volume. I guess that's all I got. I'll just turn this one down a little bit so it's more fair. Pretty close, right? Pretty close. I think they're pretty much there. Now, turning on the ensemble and the chorus, this is how they sound. So this is where they are not comparable really at all. The ensemble's just going to be a different kind of effect than the JX-3P's chorus. Now the JX is louder. Okay, so the ensemble in the SX-240 is much more shimmery, right? You've got a lot more movement going on. Whereas with the chorus, you can almost sound, especially in mono, it almost reminds me of a flanger a bit. Obviously, a chorus and a flanger are almost the same effect. Interestingly, both of these effects you can't control the speed. So you're sort of stuck. And I actually love how the ensemble sounds on this particular patch on the SX-240. I think it just sounds really awesome. However, most of the time, I do not love the ensemble on the SX-240. It takes it too far into that string machine type sound. Because this is a kind of like a synth strings type pad, it actually works really great. It almost has that Blade Runner VP330 type sound, right? This is going to have just much more of your standard Juno-y thing, which is great. I don't know. Reality says, I almost like the high pass filter aspect of the Kawai. It adds a little movement on the release. Yeah. So what I think that is, Realities, is actually just the fact that there's a separate envelope generator for the filter and the amplifier. So if you set those release values differently, I like the filter release to be a little shorter than the amplifier release, because what that lets you do is you can hear the filter close as you let go. Whereas over here on the JX-3P, where we only have one envelope per the thing, per amplifier, that it's affecting the amplifier and the filter at the same time. There we go, Alex. It's just going to give you a sound. You know, since like the JX-3P and the Poly 6, I never miss it. I never am programming a sound and like, oh, I wish I had this. But there are circumstances where it is useful. I'll show you what I would consider to be the best example of that is if I go to the filter attack and I turn that all the way down, and I turn that down all the way on the amplifier as well. We'll get more of a pluck now, which sounds great. We can do the same thing quicker by just doing that, moving this one fader here. Probably bring the cutoff a bit just to help that. They're a little off now. So something we could do though here, which wouldn't be possible in the JX-3P, is we can have the decay be a little bit longer. Let me see. And I want that cutoff a little lower, but the decay a little longer. Oh, and the sustain all the way down. Let me do that. Increase the decay so we get really nice. Maybe even a little more. Yeah, that's what we want, like a real slow sort of decay. And then if we go to the amplifier and we increase the attack. So you can hear what we're getting here. Is a slow attack, but no attack on the filter. So we can kind of get a little bit of a, you know. What's interesting though that I'm noticing here is maybe it has to do with the sustain of the amplifier. Let me turn that all the way down too, just to see what happens, and we'll increase the decay pretty long so we don't have to worry about it, but. Sometimes I'm hearing the attack there. It's not, the attack stage isn't fully canceling the start. It should be kind of like a soft, almost violin bow type sound. But in this case, even with pretty slow attack, I don't know if it's like exponential attack, so you're still hearing the sharpness on the front. You hear that? Might have something to do with the gate that I have on. It's still retaining that character. So over here, you can hear that as I increase the attack, you actually hear the filter open, like wow sort of sound. Whereas we can dodge that. You know, we can get that to be a little bit more of a thing, and would maybe increase the cutoff just a little bit. Yeah, so it's like, if I hit the same note twice, it's not starting that envelope over like a hard trigger, whereas I think it does here. No, I guess it doesn't either. It does the analog synth thing where if you... you have to play a new note for you to hear that envelope shape. I don't know, it's actually not that useful because there is a little bit of an auditory skip there going on. So yeah, sounds like some of the patches I made on the DeepMind. Don't hate me. Look, I have no fucking, this is a no shame zone. If you can imagine some of the things I've done in my life, there's no room for shame here, okay? You know, the Behringer question is interesting. I don't want to commit to an opinion on it because there's a lot that goes into that. But what I will say is that, you know, whatever criticisms you have about Behringer, I don't think that should ever be levied at the consumer, because a lot of people can't afford awesome vintage synths like this. Now, a huge reason I do these streams, by the way, is to highlight vintage synths that are affordable, like the JX-3P. I think this is an incredible $900 synth. I mean, that is like the cost of a DeepMind 12, and I think it sounds amazing, and it's truly vintage. I mean, there's no part of you that wonders like, oh, I don't know if it sounds like the Rolands did back in the 80s. It's a Roland from 1983, and you can get them for $900 today on Reverb. But the thing is that the people who buy Behringer products, and I would consider myself one of them. You're getting something because it's affordable, right? And there's a lot of synth manufacturers who are not afraid to charge you a whole lot just for the name. And so from that perspective, I'm very happy about that aspect of Behringer. Now, if you want to talk about everything that's wrong with Behringer, ripping off people's, synthesizers, and not just old synths, but people in the Eurorack scene who have just come out with something and Behringer clones it, that's fucked up, and they shouldn't do that, right? So I understand not spending money on Behringer because you don't want to support that. That's also, I get that, right? So I'm trying to have a nuanced take where we have like a little bit more depth than like Behringer bad. You know what I mean? I think the synth community, if you can understand all that's going on with the synthesizer, with filters and oscillators and envelopes and all of that shit, then you can understand the difference between having a black and white thinking when it comes to any given synth company. I'm sorry, didn't mean to get on my fucking pedestal. Yeah, I want to check it out for sure. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out for sure. I'm interested in what's going on. I think most of us don't mind them cloning synths that are old that the current companies are not making. So if a company's chosen not to reissue a synth, I'm happy that, for instance, the monopoly that I have behind me, you should be able to see it over there. I'm happy someone gets to use a monopoly because they are fucking expensive for what they are if you want a vintage one. And someone should make a monopoly. Everything else about Behringer, that's that. So I will say that. Is there anything the old one can do the new one can't? Monopoly, do you mean? I don't think so. Before I answer any more questions that are about Behringer or anything else, is there anything else anybody would like to see about these two synths? Because I feel like I pretty much covered the basics. There are things I didn't cover. So like, again, with Glissando, we can go over to Portamento speed over here. I noticed it earlier, and we can turn that up and, just... we got that sort of a thing. There's little things like that you probably don't use every day. I'm looking to see if there's anything on the panel over here that I missed. Yeah. Let's see. What are the marking charts on the top RHS of the Kawai? On the top right-hand side. What are the marking charts? Up here? Is this what we're talking about? So over here, we've got the sequencer. We have keyboard assigned chord memory and portamento speed. We have all of the stuff that relates to the oscillators in this glorious teal color. Then the LFO and the filter is all in white, and then the VCA is back in teal. And we have the high pass filter and ensemble on the far right there. So that's what's going on there. More buttons and stuff, presets and so on and so forth. Control over Portamento Glissando. The LFO can re-trigger by pressing these buttons. I covered that in my other stream on the SX-240. If you want to check that out, I have a synthesizer playlist on my channel, and you can just go back and check that out. Because there's a bunch of functions that both of these synths can do that the more you think about it, so for instance, using the envelope on the DCO2 and putting it into sync mode. Or maybe this one. You can hear that we've got this hard sync sound going. Those are not notes. Aquatic points out that there's other deals out there. Micro Monster 2, for example, unbelievable synth for the price, but not a great interface. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, but I get it. I have a tendency to recommend what I think are value synthesizers, and what I define value as is that there is such a thing as going too cheap, where you buy a synth that can't do everything you need. And then you've sort of wasted that money, or at least you've wasted some money because you're going to have to sell that, and you're going to lose money probably on the value of the synth, probably like 20-25%, as well as you have to buy boxes and packing materials and ship it off to somebody. A lot of people don't want to pay all the shipping, yada, yada, yada. So a synth like Sequential's Take 5, for instance, I think is a great synth. I think Arturio's Micro Freak, incredible synth value. But there are people who just cannot afford $600 right now. And I think it's important that we all remember what it was like to be a broke punk rock kid wanting to make awesome music and feeling like we can't because we can't afford it. And that, I don't want people to feel that. That's like my mission on this channel, is to spread the word about awesome synthesizers like the JX-3P. I love that I am so lucky and privileged to have a synth like the Kawai SX-240, but it's very hard for me to recommend this thing because it costs 2.5 times the cost of a JX-3P, meaning you could get a JX-3P, a DW8000, and an Alpha Juno for the cost of the SX-240. And probably, you know, I hope after this demonstration, I've cured some gas for some people. Having said that too, I do get criticism every time I do one of these videos that's like this synth versus that synth. What people say is it's not fair to compare them. You should have, you know, for these reasons. And I totally get that. I don't do these streams because I'm trying to shit on one synth or the other. I think I said it enough this stream, but just if I haven't fucking done it yet, I think both of these synthesizers are like life-changingly good. And if you had either, you're like good to go, you know, because some people's uncle had one of these and they get it out of the closet and they're like, I don't know if this is good. Both of these are incredible. And I don't want anybody to come away from the stream being like the SX-240 sucks. It does not suck. It is an awesome synth. It's just that the JX-3P costs 2.5 times less. And I think on the whole, just sounds awesome. So yeah, let's see. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop talking about this. I'm going to answer your questions in just a second here. I forgot to bring the microphone with me. Okay. This is an interesting stream tonight. I appreciate you guys putting up with all of the technical stuff. It's been an interesting one for sure. Okay, I'm coming. Daddy's here. Don't panic. Yeah, so let me go check up with the chat here. I'm way behind. All right. Some questions. Those kids only want plugins anyways. Yeah, and that's a good thing. I am a big recommender of plugins. I love plugins. You know, in the description of this video is my plugin Inktomi, which you can download for free. The thing is, though, that if you want a hardware interface, I understand that. And I understand why people want to have synthesizers that are hardware, but also don't cost like a crazy amount. So with that in mind, I get it. Realities in the Wall Raw says, does the SX have more precise values for its patch settings than the K3? It's an interesting looking interface, but I'm more of a knobs and sliders kind of guy. No, it does not. It is very much a pre-Kawai K3 in every way when it comes to... in every way, the Kawai K3 is superior, unless you're talking about the oscillator section. And even there's a way in which it's obviously very powerful and flexible because it's got wavetables, so it can do all sorts of stuff that's not just, you know, sawtooth, square, and pulse width modulation. But what it can't do is pulse width modulation because it's got wavetables, and wavetables back in the 80s, you couldn't do any sort of movement with them. It wasn't all serum back then. Hashtag bad gear. And the thing is that, you know, when you shoot out just the raw analog oscillators of the SX-240 versus the Kawai K3, I do think there's a difference. I don't think it's a major difference. And I actually I mean, the Kawai K3 is actually going to sound a little darker, a little closer to the JX-3P. So I love the K3. It is very hard for me to recommend the SX-240 to anybody who has a Kawai K3 because they are very similar. Yeah. So, yeah. Mark says, plugins are okay. I like buying synths that are broken, fixing them, which is awesome. Missed a Juno 106 on Reverb for $800. Wow, that's crazy. Those things have fallen in price recently, and that's terrible. For anybody who bought one at the, height of this inflation where they were going for like $3,000 and now they're going for $800. I think the vintage synth market has crashed. I think it's going to come back. I'm not worried about it. Any other questions you guys have, this is a great time to ask, by the way. But I think right now we're going to have to be okay with that the synth market's going to be suppressed for a bit. Yeah, reality. I mean, the K3 is awesome. But if you got synths that make you happy, it doesn't really matter. I'm here to spread the word about vintage synths, but I do not. The reason I only have vintage synths is because it's kind of like my weird thing that I do, but it's not that I think that vintage synths are better than modern synths or anything like that. Remember when in like the early 2000s they were $300? Yeah, so I wasn't buying synths in the early 2000s. I was that broke punk rock kid scraping by on REFX Vanguard. So Twin Cities Oxygen asked, do you miss your prologue yet? I do not, but only because I have so many incredible synths that it's hard to feel like I am missing anything, and I would feel like a piece of shit. But I don't want anybody to misinterpret that to say that I don't think the prologue is incredible and was highly underrated for its time. That was a synth that a lot of people shit on, that I think just they were way off the mark with that. It's just, that is an incredible synth, and I think people just missed it because at the time the sequential Prophet Rev 2 was out, and they seemed to be like on similar price points. For 16 voices, you had to pay $500 more. So Prophet Rev 2 was $2,000, Prologue was $1,500 for 16 voices to compare them fairly. But even then, the Prologue had VCOs and the Prophet was DCO, so there's that. But the Prophet just had more modulation capacity and stuff like that. So I think a lot of people focused on that. Realities in the Raw says, my thing with vintage synths is I don't trust their insides that are all eroded and ready to burst into flames. So this is an interesting point. I hear this one a lot, and this would be, and the only reason I'm going to say this now is because of Nick Dubstation, because we were talking about this. I think it was you, Nick. I'm sorry if I got this wrong. But essentially that, if you know what you're doing with just being able to swap out keys and a lot of these synths are very repairable. And I think a lot of people are afraid of them. I have a great synth tech, Severed Machines. And it's not that expensive to get a lot of the stuff repaired. Now, if you don't have a great synth tech and you don't feel comfortable opening up a synth, I don't, so if that's the case, I understand why people say that. But all I can say is I've had like brand new shit come and have had problems with it too. And I wouldn't say that overall, and I've bought a lot of vintage synths at this point, I've had better luck with new stuff than old stuff. I would say I would just say buying used gear, period. I've had about the same level of problems with the new stuff versus the old. And I would even go so far as to say that the old synths were made to be repaired and the new ones usually aren't. So yeah, definitely, Mark. Twin Cities asks, what's a future classic? Okay, I'll throw that one to the chat. What do you guys think is the future classic right now out there? Vanessa asks, what's your dream synth to own? I mean, of course, the Yamaha CS80. I have the CS70M, which is awesome, but I think more than anything, I just want to be able to know what a CS80 is like, of course. Beyond that, I've pretty much got everything that I want. Oberheim Expander, Prophet VS, but I would say the CS70M is my dream synth. Like overall, and there's no doubt in my mind that the CS70M does some stuff that the CS80 doesn't. Did a whole video on that I wouldn't want to live without with the CS80. But of course, Vangelis, what are you going to do? Synth Theory asks, what is your next classic synth purchase? A Jupiter? So I had my hands on a Jupiter 6 and was not super impressed. It sounded very similar to the Chroma Polaris, but I thought the Chroma might sound a little bit better. The Jupiter 6 felt very cheap to me, like just the feel of it. It did have high pass and band pass, which is great. So that kind of could take you into that CS70M territory. Yeah, so that would be that answer. And then the Jupiter 8's just kind of out of the question, right? Alan Paley asks, well, what he asked something. What does SCUM stand for? Synth Community? Aquatic, I hope this channel inspires you to one day get one vintage synth. I do not think people should go crazy like me and buy all of the ones that I have. That's mental illness acting out in front of the internet. It's not the way you should do things. But I do like that I get to showcase these instruments, because a lot of, I think like most people, the first time I looked up vintage synth prices, I was so sticker shocked that I was like, I will never buy a vintage synth. What's the point? Over the years, I've developed an understanding of that actually a lot of awesome vintage synths are cheaper than modern synths, and they sound great. And the thing I like about vintage synths is they all have a character to them, whereas a lot of modern synths are very like, they can do so much that they don't really sound like anything inherently. And you can kind of get lost, like not really feeling like you know what you want to do. Whereas if you're writing a song and you're like, oh, I want a warm pad, maybe you go to the JX-3P. It can't do all of the synth sounds, but it can do that really great. So that would be that. Alan, your question, what does SCUM stand for? SCUM's not an acronym that I've come up with yet, although synth would be a good one. Synth Community Under Mutiny could be a good acronym. But the reason I call this SCUM Night is because I essentially believe I'm not better than anybody else, and I hate people who think they're better than anybody else. And all of us here are SCUM in the sense that we don't talk down to anybody. This is an environment where if you're brand new to the hobby, we're welcoming you with open arms, as long as you're tolerant and not hateful of anybody's group because of stuff that they have no control over, like gender identity and race and all of that, gender. As long as you're cool, you're SCUM as far as I'm concerned, and welcome to the SCUM family. You're welcome here. That's why it's just, I guess, my ethos. I've been calling stuff SCUM Nights for a long time, running events down here in South Florida under the SCUM moniker, and it's kind of a thing that stuck with me. I didn't come up with it. People just started saying to me, when's the next SCUM Night? And so yeah, that would be the answer there. I hope I answered that one. Philip says, it's not analog, but the Hydrosynth feels like a future classic. I agree. That's a very good one. Aquatic Borealis says Novation Peak, maybe. I think that could be a chance. Mark says, I did a Roland JD800. 500 and works great. Oh, that's awesome. You were able to fix the red glue issue. The Synth Theory says Jupiter 4 is where it's at. Yeah, that would be another one of those legendary synth. Twin Cities Oxygen says, ever played an Andromeda or a Polyevolver? I would love to play both. We were talking about future classics. Nick and I, Prophet 12 might be up there. Just when you said Polyevolver, it made me think of it. Yeah, agree with everything you just said. Realities. Dubstation says, Aquatic, get an ESQ1. Yeah, that's a very good synth. The only reason I don't recommend that one as much as the SQ80 is just sometimes you can get an SQ80 for around the same price, although the SQ80s have gone up in price more recently. Peaker Summit, yeah, for sure. Let's see. Max says digital versus analog. I think I think nowadays that really doesn't matter as much. It mattered a lot in the 80s. So when I talk about digital and analog in the 80s, digital oscillators sounded different, so on and so forth. But Mac asks, how many synths do you own now? So my rule about synths is I have to be able to have them all hooked up and play them at once. So looking around the room, it looks like I have 8, 14, 18, 22, 24, something like that. I think I overcounted. I thought I had 22, which is way too many. No one should have this many, but I like checking these synths out on YouTube, and if I didn't have them, I wouldn't have all that much to talk about on YouTube. So that's part of that, for sure. Cheesa says, Synth Cousins united melodically. That's actually pretty damn good. Twin Cities says Micro Freak Future Classic. I'll throw that up to Dubstation since he has one. I think it very well could be. Yamaha DX-21 for the win. Quantum Future Classic. I think the Quantum's incredible. I think part of Future Classic is, you know, will it be something that they may sell enough of that people will be able to get them? What does everybody think of the Microwave XTK? I've never played one, so I don't want to offer an opinion out of ignorance. Yeah. And Alan says, yeah, Anthony Marianelli from Michael Jackson. He did like all of the synth sounds on Thriller. Lots of synths in the room and uses whatever fits the purpose. Yeah. The light bills must be nuts. So that's a little, I think you're not being serious, Mac, but synths do not pull a lot of wattage. Like a Jupiter 8 pulls like 38 watts at max or something like that. It's kind of crazy. You assume because they're so giant that they're like power hungry machines, but even like giant analog synths don't really pull a whole lot of energy. Reality says the Microfreak love the sound. It's not huge, but it's flexible. The filter's so-so. I'm sorry to hear that it's only so-so. I feel like if you're buying an analog filter in today's day and age, it had better be awesome. Twin City asks, what product do you hydrate your beard with? I use Viking Revolution, beard balm, and beard wash and conditioner. It's pretty much the cheapest shit on Amazon that's not like terrible. Tin Theory, gotta go. Thank you very much for hanging out. It was awesome, and I can't wait to see you next week, okay? Alan says Mega FM is a future classic. Yeah, that's a good point. That one's great. I mean, even Op 6, if we're talking about stuff like that one might get there. Wave State might get there. Future classic, you know. Anyways, guys, I think that's a good point for me to sign off for the night. Next week, we'll be back to check out some more synth-related stuff as we do every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and I have the most wonderful community of scum that we all get together, and I have a blast every Wednesday with you guys. So thank you. And with that, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Love and light, bitches. I am out.